see it. All right, so this was the commission with 15 members that they had. And so this was called the Semi-Centennial Commission. So they had 15 members, and it's hard to tell on here, but they each had their own different kind of responsibility. You'll see underneath there different responsibilities that they had. And so they were in charge. They used to meet like on a Saturday, like on a monthly or weekly basis. Then as we got closer, because this was still back in 1896, and they started to meet much more regularly than that. And the head of that commission was Spencer W. Clausen. So he was the main guy. He was the one in the center of that picture. So he was the main guy there. So they had two main objectives that they wanted to accomplish for this Jubilee. And so the two main objectives, first one was to make pioneers the grand central of the Jubilee. So of course they wanted to honor those pioneers that had come in, 50 years earlier. And then they had a second one. Second one, because they just become a state after, a lot of trouble trying to become a state. They became a state. So they wanted to show off how much progress that they had made in the state of Utah during that time period. All right, so they had several things they had to decide. Forgetting, can't see that. Several things they had to decide on. One of those first things was what would be the date of it. Right now we use the 24th, right, for our dates. But they wanted to make this a great celebration. So they decided to hold it for 5 days, the 20th through the 24th. So that's a Tuesday through a Saturday. There were some activities that were held on Sunday, but it was mainly just, they had some talks and things, but the main celebration was actually during that period of time from Tuesday to Saturday. So another item that they needed to do is figure out a name. Because remember, the governor first said like an Intermountain Fair or something, but this was going to be a big United States kind of thing that they wanted to invite people to. And so they held a contest. And this would have been, that contest was in December of 1896. And they had over 600 people submit ideas. And this lady here, Miss Kinkle, won it with her idea of a Utah Pioneer Jubilee. So that's how the name came about, Utah Pioneer Jubilee. And she got $50, which seems like a pretty good amount at that time. So that was one of the items that they came up with. The other, they decided, well, let's have some colors. What can we kind of do for colors for the celebration? And so they said, well, let's have some things that the pioneers saw on their way here and also while they were here. So one of those was red. They decided to use red on some of the things that they were using to represent the Indian paintbrush. Another one was green for the sagebrush, and there's plenty of that around for them to see, and we still see. And the third one was yellow for sunflowers, and still a lot of those around. So that was another item that they decided to have. And that shows up on a lot of different things like a program. And some things I'll hold up here that are original. I can find the different ones. And you can, those that are here are welcome to come up after and take a look at some of these items. So there's the Pioneer program here, and you'll see the colors, the yellow, the red, the green, and so forth. And so this is one of the letterheads that they used, the commission used. Here you'll see the commission members that we looked at before, and they sent letters around, things like that. So that was on that piece of letterhead. All right, so the next item, and this seems a little strange, but who is a pioneer? Who shall they honor at that celebration? And so they decided would it be just those first pioneers that came into the valley with the Brigham Young group, which there were about 158 left, but one or two they left back to a river to cross and gained one or two more. So approximately 157. Oh, there it was right there. So that was the one right there showing that we held up. So you're welcome, those that are here, to come up and get a better look at that one. I had those back there somewhere, I guess. That's the finest copy I've ever seen of their letterhead. There's a lot of older ones around, but they've been folded and wrinkled up and stuff. So it's kind of fun. So should they honor just those pioneers that came in at that time? And there were about 28 is all that were still living. Wilford Woodruff was the oldest, one of those original pioneers, by the way. Or should they honor all those that came in during that first year of 1847? Because there were about 2,000 that came between that July and October. And of those, there were still roughly like 720. That's a hard number to come up with. About 720 that were still living at that time. And so they thought, well, who shall we honor in all this? Because they only had that $15,000 because the legislature added another 10. And they decided to take about 50,000 to put on this celebration like they really wanted. So they were way short. So something that helped out a little bit, though, because the pioneers at that time were scattered all over Utah, but then all over the country by 50 years after they came, of course. So somebody that came to their help was some of the railroads. So this is an actual letter, and I've got a copy of it here somewhere that you're welcome to come up and look at. There it is right there. An actual letter that one of the pioneers, John Steele, received, inviting him to come on the Oregon Short Line Railroad. And so they would give them free transportation, with the ticket as it mentions here and so forth. So that helped save a lot of money, of course, trying to get those pioneers that could. A lot of them were older, of course, by that time and really couldn't travel or very feeble.
So you're saying the budget paid for the railroad tickets?
Railroads gave it for free.
The railroad sponsored it.
Yes.
John Steve. Yeah.
So that helped them to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Another invitation that they received. This is the most recent acquisition. I've collected, probably 30 years and stuff, but sometimes I have money, sometimes I don't. Usually I don't, but every once in a while. So this one I just got a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
There's very few of those that are known around, so that was exciting. But this is an actual invitation to each pioneer, and it opens up. I have it folded here, but opens up and tells a little bit of things and invites them to the celebration. So that's kind of fun. All right, so that was there's the little bigger picture of it right there of that invitation. All right, so now here we are. We're now in June, so June of 1847. So we're only less than 2 months away from the celebration. By now they had about 20,000 out of the 50,000 that they thought they would need to put on this huge celebration. So they decided, and people, a lot of them were just, kind of like nowadays, a little lackadaisical about it. And, oh, great, we're going to have a few parades and stuff. So they decided they need to really generate some activity. So this is the old Salt Lake City Theater, and they decided to invite tons of people there and try and get them enthused about donating some money. So they had the governor speak here, Wells. They had another fiery speaker, B.H. Roberts, if you've heard of him, talk. But I think the most fun one was this guy here. Let me first of all read one thing before he started to speak. Another fellow was talking, Horace Whitney, who was another one, and he said he's heard these following words, and this is a quote from one of the commission people, hearing people talk about this. He says, they're saying, the extravagance of buying gold badges for the pioneers was loudly inveighed against, and once an injunction by legal process was hinted at, while the wanton waste of building perishable floats and the sin of investing in such transitory amusements as fireworks was bitterly declaimed against by another class of objectors. So he was hearing some of those kind of comments, big waste of money. Why are we doing this? So anyway, like I say, they went to hold this meeting, and this member here, Edward Colburn, said some interesting things during that meeting, and he was in charge of finance, so you can understand why he was quite concerned about this. So let me read some fun little quotes from him. So I quote here, he says, "We have advertised this Jubilee far and wide. 500 special letters have been sent every week to Western newspapers. There will be from 50,000 to 75,000 people here." And that's a hard number to come up with, but I guess that's not too far. So that's a lot of people coming in for this activity to see what you do. If you do not what is commensurate with your wealth, history, and love for the pioneers, you will be the most laughed at people on this continent. Rise up in this emergency. Keep your state from being disgraced. If Brigham Young and his band of 147 had no more spirit than some of their descendants, they would never have crossed the first creek this side of winter quarters.
Ouch.
So that was I thought that was, he was pretty forceful in saying that. Then he went on to say, and I quote, "I'd rather be a songbird now than anything on earth, so I could move house to house, keeping an unending song of Utah, I love thee. That's the song that we hear all over town when we go after money. We enter these marble portaled banks and sit upon the upholstered furniture and wait for these poor public servants and the bankers. But we haven't time to get money from them for listening to their song of Utah, I love thee." He then read of several businesses that had donated and said there are no banks among them except the Zions Bank. He said the other banks are still singing Utah, I love thee. So he was really making fun of none of these big wealthy business people are doing it. Anyway, that seemed to work. And so they started to get donations just from individuals. I've seen a list of people's names that $1, 50 cents, $5, things like that. But then there are some bigger donors. See if some of you, especially the older ones, might remember some of these names. Arbach, Dinwiddie, Eccles, McCune. Hopefully those names to some of you mean something. They were very wealthy people in the community at that time, and some of them still are. You hear about the McCunes and the Eccles donating a lot. So anyway, so they were able to raise the money that they needed. They had some other fun things that they were using to raise some money. They had different items. One of those was a Jubilee cup, it's called. Really fun. This was made in Vienna, and it was rolled steel with enameled on the outside. And the decorations are really cute. I've got a few pictures of this one, so those the rest of you can see. But there's the buffalo with a rifle on it, the honeybee, and the seagull lilies below, Indians on it. So fun type of things. And this was given out or sold by Jocelyn and Park, which was a company there on Main Street in Salt Lake City. And here's an ad that I found after going through probably hundreds of newspapers from 1846, 1847. But this was one that they had, so they sold it for $1. And
most beautiful souvenir of Utah ever offered.
yeah, that's what they're saying. And it was interesting because they, I say, others that are here are welcome to come up after and take a closer look at that. And they were saying they got some of the ideas from, this was Queen Victoria, and she was having her 60th Jubilee. By the way, Jubilee can mean 10 years, 25, 50 years, 60 years. She was having her 60th year that she had reigned there in Great Britain. And so she had a similar cup. And another one of those right here that you're welcome to look up afterwards.
Oh, that's one of hers.
Yeah, that's one of those too. Another one was that they held, and some people say this is where they got the idea, because this cup came out in 1896. And this was the Russian Tsar, is his name right? Find it here. Nicholas II. And so he had that produced, and they said that's where some of the folks got that idea. So they had that. They also produced a program, which is a really neat program. This is an original copy of that. This is the front, and there's the back of that. Really fun. They were lithographed in New York, the front cover and the back cover, because it was such a colorful, and you'll see the Jubilee colors, remember, on all over the programs here. And but the inside of it was done by George Q. Cannon Printing Company, because the inside just had black lettering with some red, occasionally red lettering in it. And anyone wants to see what the inside looked like, this is just a copy. They're welcome to come and see it. Just what it did was give the activities of the various days, activities for that week. So that was kind of fun. All right, so another item was called the Hall of Relics. This was a wooden building, a wooden structure that they built just for this Jubilee celebration. And it was right south of Temple Square. And sometimes you'll hear me refer to East Temple, which is Main Street. But back then, some of them called it East Temple, just like we have North, South, West Temple, and East Temple. But sometimes they refer to it as Main Street. I've seen it written up both ways in the old newspapers. So they had this, that there was just a temporary structure. It was only going to be for a short time, but ended up being for quite a few months that they had it. And inside of that structure, they had the original pioneers that came across donate some item that they brought across the plains with them, including some Brigham Young's wagons and things like that were inside there for people to see.
What?
And yeah.
And then they just dismantled the building?
Mm-hmm. After originally just going to be through the Jubilee celebration, but they had so many people coming to see it that it lasted for quite a few months.
Seems
actually.
Like a beautiful building to.
Yeah, all made out of woods. And so the next slide, this is telling about it. Here, the Hall of Relics, they called it, where it was built there. So this one they did earn some money from, 25 cents for adults and 15 cents for the kids. So you guys got in pretty cheap there. Of course, back then, not so cheap. All right, now there were other items that were not part of the celebration necessarily. This is the thing that actually got me started on the Jubilee, like 30 years ago or something like that. So let's see who's on the front of that thing. Picture of Brigham Young on this beer mug, which is a Pabst mug. And so I did research on that before I knew anything about the Jubilee and find out that's where it came from.
Wow.
And here you'll see it's a company called BK Block and Company, which is a distributor of wine and drinks and stuff in Salt Lake City, and they had one in Ogden too and so forth. So it just talks about the Jubilee itself right there. And then they gave that away free, this time. And I actually talked to the Pabst Blue Ribbon historian, and he has one of those mugs. And so it was interesting and sent me a little letter. And he said their main company did not actually produce it, but they used to make blanks without any lettering on. And he said it probably came from their Denver area, and then the people just, whoever wanted, could have things put on them. So they were popular little souvenir items. So anyway, I thought that was quite unique to see that with Brigham's picture on that.
Yeah. Brigham had a brewery and a distillery too.
Okay. So other items, just this was a Pioneer Jubilee item there, and this was actually called the Stiegel Clothing Company, and so just little things like that were around, and spoons. That's kind of a neat spoon, and this reason for that one is look at the Jubilee colors you see right there in Pioneer Jubilee. So they used to do spoons for a lot of different things. You've probably seen those that they've got.
Spoon collection.
Oh, is that right? Yeah.
Souvenirs.
I wonder if she has that one in there, one of those. But yeah, they have a lot of old Salterra spoons, things like that. And then they had a lot of different badges, close to 30 of them. In this case down here, is the ones that I've been able to collect. I wish I had all 30 of them, but got, a few of them anyway. So they're kind of fun ones, but these were different businesses around would sell them and use them, but they're kind of fun to look at. But they all related to the Jubilee on that.
It looks like you got a little different
Yeah, I need to take a new picture of that one.
set there.
Picture of that one there. So anyway, some fun things like that. You're welcome to take a closer look. But those occasionally you'll find, I used to find them in the antique store after many hours of calling around or going around stuff. But now eBay is one of the better sources, but they're hard to come up with anymore. All right, so now we get to the actual celebration part. So the first day, that remember this was Tuesday when it started. So in the morning they fired off a cannon, but then they had the original pioneers that were still around that came to the celebration. They had them march from the old fort, which was Pioneer Park. You know where Pioneer Park is, 3rd South, 3rd East. They had them march from there up to East Temple or Main Street by the Brigham Young Monument to honor them. And so here's a fun picture of the Brigham Young statue. And here's where they had the pioneers sit, those original pioneers sit. This is when it was still covered up. And so a fun picture. So this is now that very day on that Tuesday when look how many people gathered around here in the old Deseret News Publishing Building and so forth. So they had all the dignitaries there. Wilford Woodruff, the president of the church, oldest living pioneer, was there to give a prayer, but he was not feeling good that day, and so he had another person give it. But from my understanding, he could help kind of pull the flag off the monument. And there it is now with the monument out the flag there. And these were the original pioneers in their special seating. But you see all the people gathered around there, so a big group. And
Is that it? This is the place now, or where is that statue now?
it's still there.
Is it still there?
It, but the next picture. So this is where it used to be when I was not that many years ago. It was right here. This is South Temple. This is Main Street. And if none of you are old enough to remember the stuff, but you used to have to, well, I think it was 1992, so it wasn't that long ago. You used to have to come down and go around in your car or go around the other side of it. And so about 1992 or so, they moved this 82 feet this way. And so now it doesn't block the streets going through here. And all this is off to, no traffic gets through there now. So originally, a guy named C.E. Dallin was the architect, and he actually had that monument at the Chicago World's Fair in 1893 in one of the Utah exhibitions there. And then it was moved here. And this is where it was before they did the dedication here. So it was here on a wooden stand for several years, somewhere between 1893 and 1897. But that's the actual site where it was. And they moved it over here just a few days before that and placed the statue onto the monument they'd built. But those of you that have seen the monument, do you see anything missing from it on the sides of it? There was they had a trappers on one side, the old trappers, and they had Indians on the other side. So if you go look at it now, that's what you'll see on that. But they did that in 1900, so 3 years after the.
It looks like they were planning on that.
Yeah,
they
yeah,
left space
had it all
to complete the monument.
Exactly. So yeah, 3 years later in 1900, they placed those items on there. But anyway, so that's kind of interesting to see that. And I say it's been moved up that way, but still there. If anyone wants to drive in, take a look at it.
Who's the artist? Do you know?
C.E. Dallin
You said that.
was the artist of it, the sculptor of it. All right. So now the next thing that happened that afternoon, we're still on that Tuesday, the first day, that afternoon, they had the pioneers that were still there gather at the tabernacle. And they let them in at 1:30, and they did it in alphabetical order and had them seated there. Then at 2:30, they allowed everybody else to come in and fill up the tabernacle. And they did a real special thing, and that was they had a special Jubilee badge made by Tiffany and Company, which is a well-known jeweler back in New York, for each of the surviving pioneers. And these were kind of the highlight of the getting something from the Jubilee period. And you see it has the beehive, 4 bees on the outside, Pony Express rider, old covered wagon, and the railroad, which had come through, of course, in '69 stuff. And on the back of those badges, they had inscribed, presented by the state of Utah to, then the name of the pioneer 1847. This one belonged to Priscilla Parish Roundy. Where I live in Centerville, it was all kinds of parishes. I mean, they're part of those that settled, and there's still parishes around there that I know very well.
And we know some Roundies.
And Shadrach Roundy was the original one that came through. He was in Centerville for a while, and his son, let's see, Shadrach, I'm trying to think of his son's name. Sure, I got it down here just so I get that right information to you. Was Shadrach, come on. Lorenzo Roundy. So Shadrach had a son named Lorenzo. He's the one that married Priscilla Parish Roundy. So those are kind of the neatest thing from there. And this is her actual badge right there. And so I've given presentations to the parish family, and of course they would love that. But I have such a hard time getting it that I'm not willing to give it up yet.
I wish I invited my Roundy friends to come.
Oh, yeah. And this I don't have a picture of it, but it came in this little case here. So these badges were inside this little case. On the back of it had the name kind of written on some paper and stuff like that. So those are fun things.
The one you have, is this a replica?
That's a replica.
It looks too new.
Yep. So they do have replicas around. So be careful if you find one for $12 on eBay. That's like that one was, a replica. So, all right. And so that badge allowed those original pioneers that got one, like over 720 some odd. That's a hard number to come up with, but free to get into any of these activities that they were holding on that. And they had these bike races and back then it was called Beck's Hot Springs. You've heard of Beck's Hot Springs out there on the, what is it, kind of Beck Street. Well, it's actually still Beck Street. Anyway, it used to be a kind of a bathing place using the hot mineral water and stuff like that. They had bike races there. Fort Douglas, which is still up there, they had baseball games up there, dances out at Saldair, which was in existence back then, and a lot of concerts in the tabernacles. So those are some of the activities that they had for people to attend that week. All right, let's move on to the next day of the parade. So this would now be Wednesday, and they call it the Parade of Progress, just kind of showing off different things. I'll go through these pretty quickly there, but so there's the parade route going down Main Street or East Temple, and you'll see these were wrapped, with a red, kind of red and white actually on these ones, and the flag, which would have had 45 stars then, right? Because we're the 45th state. And there's another one, just another view. Look at all the crowds here with their umbrellas to keep out the sun off them and so forth. And there's people out there, looking out the windows so they had a good view of the parade.
The guy up there on the wires.
Yeah.
On the left.
Oh, that guy.
Sitting on the electric.
Oh,
Okay, and then there's another one that had some of the dignitaries, and there's a stage coach. So just kind of showing off different things like that. And then every parade has to have the queen of the parade, right? So her name was Emily Lunt, L-U-N-T. And there she is coming by in her carriage. So she was the queen of that Jubilee parade. And then there's the Desert News put in a float, that one right there. And the Leighton Roller Mills was in existence. And there's the horses pulling that, people along the parade route. Oh, there's the monument right there. So they were just starting off, because that's where the parade started, actually, was right by the monument, and then went down to about 4 South, third or 4 South. Just one showing the, part of the temple. The temple had been, of course, completed by then.
And that's a float?
And that's just a float, yeah. See the horses pulling that big, that big float there. Look at the size of those reins. Those of you that have been around horses now. I've ridden a few horses, but I'd hate to try and drive one of the length of those reins.
Yeah, that's pretty, it's pretty high.
It would be. All right, so then the next day, the third day of the parade, they held what they called a children's parade. So all you kids would have been in that parade, because they say thousands and thousands of children from Weber County, Davis County, Salt Lake County, all over the place in this parade. And they had different floats there for them. So some of you kids recognize what that would be. Is that Mother Goose kind of looks like? And here's one that you probably recognize. Peter, pumpkin eater. Look at that. So this would be right next to the tabernacle and the wall there.
Yeah. All lesson donkeys.
Yeah, and look who's pulling that one. So then one with a beehive, kids, some of the kids on it there. Horses pulling that one, of course. And then this is the children. I mentioned that there were thousands of kids, little kids in that. So there they were. They started off at that monument, and they threw, each of them threw like a little flower at the base of that Brigham Young monument. And they marched down that. And some fellow, I found a statement by a quote from this guy here, George Reese, on this Children's Parade Day. And he says, quote, "This was a banner day so far. There must have been 10,000 children before the end of the parade. It began to rain a little, just enough to wet the paper parasols that you see, causing the red coloring to run on the girls' white dresses, a feature which will stamp on their minds the occasion as long as they live." And I'm just curious I wanted to make sure that was true. So I found a weather thing right from that very day, and it had just light rain, not like a heavy rain, but light enough rain, I guess, to do that. So I thought that was interesting. And then they even had, not the parade necessarily, but they had it lit up. So I'd never seen back that far. And I think is that ZCMI, it seems like, over on that side of the street. But anyway, so they had part of where they had that main street kind of lit up, which was, I thought, interesting back in those days to have done that. All right, then the fourth day, so now we're Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, now we're on Friday. So the fourth day, they did a parade of the counties. And I should have taken some time to find Utah County, where you guys live, but the ones that I had were mainly from my area, Davis County. So here's one here that shows the livestock that they had. And then another one that shows Davis County band, with produce, which Davis County was known for. And this actually is B.H. Roberts on his horse, because he was from Davis County, actually lived in Centerville. And his old house was there, and I saw it before it got torn down. So there's always something that happens in these big events. So let me read this. 3 Jubilee pickpockets. S.D. Simpson, J.A. Parker, and Frank White are 3 alleged crooks who have joined the Toughs, now held at the county jail for trial. These men are charged with attempting to pick pockets during the Jubilee, but their operations were nipped in the bud by Officer Sheets, Rowley, and Welch. They have been unable to give bond and will remain in the county jail until the case comes up for trial. And I thought, And I found that, and can't see it up above, but this was just a few days after the end of the Jubilee. They were still in jail there. So anyway, I thought that was pretty funny to see these three toughs, they call them. Anyway, and there were other accidents, like whenever you have that many horses around, there's bound to be things happen. So some people got ran over, nobody killed or anything, but some accidents like that happens during a big event. All right, so now the last day of the parade, which was a Saturday, was the biggest of all the parades because they used a lot of the floats from the previous days. Plus, they put all the pioneers in these covered wagons and march along. So that would have been a lot of covered wagons down through there. So it was a very large parade. And here's a picture of Brigham Young's wagon here being pulled by his grandkids. So these are grandchildren. They're a little older, of course, pulling one of his wagons. He had several. He had a sleeping wagon. I think you got a picture of that. There's one of his wagons right there. And there's the sleeping wagon. And so this was, I wasn't sure if this was before the parade or after the parade, but that's one of the several wagons that Brigham Young, had there. And then, of course, some hand carts, which came quite a few years later, but they had those in the parade. And this is a great picture. So in the afternoon of that last day, after the parade and everything, they gathered as many of the pioneers that they could get that had attended. Some had gone home by then because this was, like I say, a 5-day event, and others, of course, just couldn't even make it. So I tried to count and came up with about 332 pioneers here, because there are some people in the background that, just kind of walking through. But you'll notice they have a ribbon on them, all those pioneers, and the next picture, you'll see the badge I showed you. So the badge actually came with a ribbon, which I don't have yet. I haven't found one of those. So there's that badge there, and they wore it different places. Guy on his lapel and different things. So anyway, so those badges they wore proudly. But that picture, let's see, did I have that somewhere? I think one of the kids brought in. Oh, yeah, that one. So that was done by George Edward Anderson from Springville, famous photographer at that time. And there's tons of copies of that around, but that's an original copy that he made, actually. So you'll see a lot of different copies around, but that's an old, real original one of his that he produced. He produced, several for sale and stuff on that. So that's one of my funner items to have that thing. All right, another thing they produced was they called the Book of the Pioneers. And that's a kind of a weird guy there holding it. It's hard to recognize that guy anymore. But anyway, and that used to be, and I think it might still be down at the Union Pacific Railroad station, because that's where the State Historical Society was for a long, long time. And they had 2 volumes. One went from A to L, and the other went from M to Z of that. So that they brought it out. Let me hold that up and take a picture of it. But inside that, they had the foresight, and this was the commission that had this done, semi-centennial commissioners, they sent them a page to write on. And that page looks like this. So, and if they asked them to do it if they could in their own handwriting, but a lot of them are too feeble, so they'd have to have a relative write it. But see whose name is up there? Yeah. So I was able to find the page of the badge that I have. Tells about where they live, Canara, in Iron County, if you know where that is, and where they came from, came from. Let's see, whose company, Peregrine Sessions was her company that she was in. And then remember I said that some of the pioneers could donate something to that temporary structure that they built for people to come and see. Okay, look. Can furnish the following relics for the pioneer journey. So she donated 1 sugar bowl. And it was her donation to it. By the way, when they tore that down, a lot of those items are in the Daughters of Utah Pioneers Museum. If you've been to that, right at up the end of Main Street there. Neat museum if you haven't. That's a fun museum if Not sure if it's open right now. Hopefully they've opened back up. But so a lot of those items they took and put in that museum. All right, so the final event there on this Saturday we're talking about, after all the parades, was done in the evening. This is that main street or East Temple going up to, there's the temple there, going up to Capitol Hill. It was called Capitol Hill, but where's the Capitol?
Yeah.
There's no Capitol at that time yet. So we went up on that hill. So there it is from the other angle. There's the top of the hill here where the Capitol would be down in this area. And they had those fireworks that some people weren't too happy about spending money on, right? They had a great display of fireworks there. And thousands of people, well, actually tens of thousands of people came up there and crowded around to see those fireworks. And let me read from one journal. Somebody. Okay, remember Wilford Woodruff was the oldest living pioneer at that time and president of the church. And so this is a quote from his journal. It says, "With my wife, Emma, and brother Smith, drove to the city this evening to see the fireworks. Could not get near enough with carriage to see them, so returned home."
Oh.
So
The president of the
I
church.
can't believe the commission didn't make better arrangements. So that's the way they did a great job, but I think that's one thing they kind of fell down in, is not making arrangements. So it was so crowded, his carriage, because he was old and really couldn't walk up that area, but they couldn't even get close enough to stay and see the fireworks. So anyway, kind of a sad deal there. All right, so I think there's a lot of accomplishments that happened. I'll just quickly go through some of these for this Jubilee and why I think it's such a great celebration. Dedication of the Brigham Young Monument. It was the impetus to form the Daughters of Utah Pioneers. 3 years later, they formed that organization. It was a financial success. In fact, they gave back $1,000 to the legislature. Whoever hears of anybody turning anything back. So they'd made that, whatever it took, 50,000, they turned 1,000 of that back because they'd made enough from these other events. Then all these things that we've looked at, neat things that came from that Jubilee time period. And picture like the one that we saw there of many of the surviving pioneers. Handwritten pages like I showed from them. And then the Utah State Historical Society was actually formed because of that Jubilee, so they could kind of keep things like that. So do you remember the two main objectives that they wanted? To make the Jubilee the grand central idea, the pioneers, the grand central idea of the Jubilee. And I think they accomplished that, all that we've seen. And to show the greatness of the state of Utah, which had just become a state. And I think they did a great job of showing Utah off. So anyway, I think that Jubilee celebration, that's why I think it's such an amazing event, so significant, and my favorite of any of the 24th Jubilee celebrations on that. So anyway, thank you. Kids did great. Usually just the adults attend these, because they know the kids' history, but that's great. So thanks you guys for doing such a great job there on that. So
how many people in this photograph are identifiable? Like, do they know the names of all? They probably know the names, but how many can they match to the faces?
The Daughters of Utah Pioneers has tried very hard. And you go onto their website and you'll find that picture, Daughters of Utah Pioneers, DUP. You'll find that picture, and they've got a number of them identified and circled with their name that the family members have gone and said, that looks like mine. They'll kind of compare and try and pick out their great-great-grandfather, grandmother, something like that. So if you go on there, they'll actually have names associated with some of those. But I need to take a more recent look. 'Cause last time I looked, there was maybe 20% of them or something like that identified. A lot of them were not. But anyway, so yeah, that's fun. So I don't know if there's other questions, but yeah.
So you mentioned the badges. What are those badges in the frame? What were those for?
Oh, just different organizations, different stores actually would have those and sell them to people as just a little souvenir badge. So all kinds of little trinkets, and they were, you look back in the old times, and there's a lot of these badges for old events that were held in the 1800s and stuff like that. It was just kind of a favorite thing to have different of those cheaper, badges like that. And there's one particular company that I forget the name of it, anyway, that you'll see on the back of those that made up some of those, but they were just something special for people to buy to take home as a souvenir.
Not
Yeah.
just for the pioneers, but just
Oh, yeah, no, and yep, those were,
Okay.
except for that one special one.
You like earned.
I'm sorry, what's that?
It wasn't something that you earned. Like,
No, no, the only thing that was earned was that one that I showed you, that gold badge from
That's
Tiffany.
a little replica.
Yeah.
So you said you got interested when you came across that mug?
That much. Yeah, I just thought, what in the world is Brigham Young doing on a beer mug?
Now where did you find the mug?
Oh, and I've had a bunch of them. I've had several of them. They're not too hard to find around. You'll occasionally see them pop up. And
Like, did you come across an TI or something?
no, this was trying to think, the very first one was I think just in an antique store, because back then when I first started, there was no such thing as eBay or
Yeah.
KSL.com, the things like that. So I'd go around to just different antique stores and got to be friends with some of the dealers, and they would call me if they had something
Yeah.
Jubilee related come in.
So before the mug, what were you collecting? Anything Pioneer?
Just I think we had some treadle sewing machine from my grandma and just some things like that. But she was my grandma, not a great grandma that would have been part of that. So I had nothing that was actually from that Jubilee period. They were from a later period. So a few little things like that. And my wife has some depression glass that she liked to collect. So just stuff like that, but not very much. So I got into this, which I never should have probably. Anyway, no, it's been fun. It's been fun actually.
Everything displayed at your house, you have like a room board or something?
Nope.
Or is it kind of in
I've
box?
got one little office area, and I've got a few little things up there,
Yeah.
but there's just too much. And I've got a file drawer at least this thick with other things. I mean, more paper things and stuff like that, and the documents that I've read every newspaper in 1896 that was in Utah, 1896 and 97, looking for any articles about it. Pick up on it.
So I'm guessing you're not any relation to the Priscilla Parish. right?
No,
It was
no.
just the one you got.
Yeah, and I know a lot of their family,
Okay.
like I say, and did a presentation for their family and stuff. But I've actually had 2 or 3 of those badges, and various times I've bought and sold, to get something else and stuff. But when I got that one, because it was, I knew people that were related, I wanted to hold on to that one and stuff. So.
And you may have said, I may have missed it, but did you have family members who were alive, or who were pioneers at all? Were any of your ancestors in that picture?
Not in that picture. I had a lot of ancestors. The Knights were some of my relatives that were in Colesville, some of the original ones in Colesville that even Prophet Joseph Smith worked for and visited and stuff like that. And in fact, my wife and I went back there and gave tours in the house where they lived and stuff like that a few years ago. So it was more in that time period, but none of them came across during that first year. Had the others come across later than that, but not during that time that they got honored. Yeah. Unfortunately, it's too bad. It would have been fun. Yes, sir.
How long has it taken you to collect all these items?
No, I need to look more specific, but I'd say about 30 years, but it's not been full time by any means. I got started on it, then I would have, other things going on, work and all kinds of other little assignments and stuff like that. And then I'd get interested. I started to do these presentations quite a while ago, but with the pandemic, I haven't done one for, a lot more than a year. And so that's why I have to keep kind of referring to notes and stuff, occasionally.
Yeah, sure.
So just occasionally I get asked to do it now, not, but so it's been roughly that long, but it hasn't been full on trying to find them. And I don't always have enough money to buy ones that I see that I want, stuff like that. So, but it's been fun, just something a little different that a lot of people haven't heard too much about. So something a little different.
I mean, I remember I was a teenager in the 1997 sesquicentennial
So that'd be the 100th.
150 year, and that was when they started doing like the pioneer treks, and I think that's when they opened this as the place, or at least that was the first time I had ever been there. But the state park up there.
Uh-huh.
So,
Yeah, and they actually had if you recall, a wagon train for the 100th year, which would have been 1947. And they kind of redid that trek across the plains there,
yeah.
stuff.
Just wondering, do you study a lot of history in general, or do you focus mostly narrowly on the Pioneer Jubilee?
Well, that's been the main focus, but I've gone back and did some, I like other history kind of things that are related. And I said I had an ancestor that lived in Colesville, which was a pretty important town in the old days, and that knew the prophet. So I've done that kind of history study and things like that. But but mainly this, I guess. Getting too old to remember stuff anymore.
Are you in any kind of historical groups, like working with other people?
I'm just
work together on?
not on this. I'm a member of the Sons of Utah Pioneers. Like they have a Daughter of Utah Pioneers. We have a Sons of Utah Pioneers organization I've belonged to for a lot of years, and we have guest speakers come in and stuff like that. In fact, I think that's where Joshua found that I did this presentation from their website or something. So, but that's about the only one that I've been closely associated with.
So how do you like to celebrate Pioneer Day? Do you go to the Days of 47
We
things?
we have on occasion sometimes gotten so crazy to try and go down there with the traffic and things like that. So it's been a few years since I've been there. In our little Centerville, we do a big 4th of July. That's our big celebration
Yeah.
time on that. So it's usually just sometimes quite often I'll actually watch the parade on TV and stuff like that. But it's been a few years since I attended the last one because, like I say, it was pretty hectic.
We decided this year we're gonna have a Pioneer Day Carnival right here. You could join us if you
Oh, a
want.
pine.
Then you can too.
little carnival, huh?
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, we're just in the front yard.
Well, and just wherever, it depends on what activities people come up with. They might need to use inside or,
Okay. Jane's gonna plan it.
yeah, she's the brain.
Oh,
brain child.
all right. Seems like a sharp young lady. Good one to put in charge of that. You'll just be like that semi-centennial commission, right?
Yeah. all of
Remember that guy that was the main guy over all that? So,
them. Yeah.
but be sure and assign it out just like they did. You got to have somebody in charge of this or that or the.
Yes, but her budget is much smaller.
Oh.
Even in today's dollars. No, it's not. Ice. Just look at it.
All right.
Wonderful.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you guys. I appreciate that. So,
Thank you.
yeah, it's been fun. This is a fun area. I say Centerville, when I first moved there, it was a very
Yeah.
small town of like 5,000.
Mhm.
We had tractors and horses going along the streets. My dad's always had horses and stuff like that. So it's been really fun. Thank you.
How long ago did you move to?
To Centerville, I was 13 years old.
Oh, okay.
So it would have been a long time ago.
Nice.
It would have been 1957. So it was a very rural
So
place
you've
back
seen a
then.
lot of growth.
A lot of changes and growth is okay, but I kind of like the open spaces, but can't find that anymore unless of course, you guys here have been fortunate to have some of this. And I drove this along the street there for a minute because I was a little early. I saw horses over there and some big area through there, kind of neat. So,
Yeah, it is nice.
Are you,
to have open space.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you familiar with the 1880 Jubilee? At 50 years after the church was established. I remember my dad telling me about that.
Oh.
But then, like John Taylor declared one, and they had some celebrations, and they forgave the debt. If anyone had perpetual immigration debt, they.
yeah, and I remember that part. But yeah, I remember. them.
Oh, I was wondering if you knew any more about that. I don't know anything beyond that, really.
So So yeah, I actually remember that. I don't remember a lot of details of that, but they did kind of have that period of time. So
Yeah.
That was kind of, yeah.
Now, is this this Tiffany's badge? Is this is it just plated or is it actual?
It's gold plated. I don't know if it's
Steel or-
14 karat gold. Yeah, I don't know what
What metal it is?
metal that is.
Like gold plated.
Yeah.
Denver, we were talking
I've
about.
got somebody trying to figure out through the analysis if those are 14 or 12 or 18 karat gold. I'm not sure.
Entire
Hey, you
population
cannot have
of
those.
brings out and celebrate the day.